Welcome to the eCommerce Badassery Podcast, the place for scrappy entrepreneurs who want to learn actionable steps and strategies to grow the traffic, sales, and profit in your e-commerce business. I'm your host, Jessica Totillo-Coster, a 20-year retail veteran and former brick-and-mortar boutique owner who spent 3 years as the only employee of a 7-figure online store. That shit was crazy. I know exactly how it feels to do all the things, and I'm sharing everything I learned the hard way so you don't have to. I may have started this business by accident, but supporting badass bosses like you lights me the fuck up, and I am so stoked to see you grow. Are you ready, babe? Let's roll. Welcome back to the eCommerce Badassery Podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Totillo-Coster. Let's jump right in and talk about the latest tariff announcements, how they're likely to affect you, and what you can do about it. First things first, while I'm going to give you a general overview of the announcements to hopefully clarify any confusion, things are literally changing as we speak. I held off recording this episode as long as possible to make sure I had the most up-to-date information, but by the time you're listening to this, things might have changed. To give you some context, I'm recording this on Monday, April 7th. Last I heard, China retaliated to our 34% retaliatory tariff, and then Trump retaliated again, effectively pushing our tariffs on China over 100%. Fingers crossed that doesn't actually come to fruition. Regardless of where we're at by the time you are listening to this, I would not expect this tariff conversation to just stop in 30 days from now. Ultimately, the reasoning behind these tariffs seem to shift depending on who's talking about it. Some argue they're about reviving American manufacturing. Others say they're about securing better trade deals. For some, it's about limiting the flow of fentanyl, and some just point to the need to close the trade deficit. With no consistent benchmark for success, it's hard to tell what the actual end game is or how we'll know when we've reached it. My best guess, it will likely be an ongoing issue with much uncertainty and back and forth. It's going to affect everyone one way or another, so the recommendations I'm making in this episode will be relevant no matter where we're at. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, I just want to remind you that as the CEO of your company, your number one priority right now is to control the things that you can control. I think we talked about this on one of the other episodes where I covered these policies, but it bears repeating. The news and social media, they're part of the attention economy. Their job is to keep you hooked. And one of the easiest ways to do that is by making you feel anxious and overwhelmed. The more you doom scroll, the more ad revenue they rake in. Now, I'm not saying ignore it altogether. It's important to stay informed so you can make smart decisions and protect your business. But don't get caught in the spiral. Your energy is too valuable. In this moment, your mindset matters just as much as your marketing strategy. Yes, things are shifting. Yes, it might feel heavy right now, but don't let that noise pull you away from the work. You're still building something important, and your customers, they need you to show up. Previously, we talked about being in a wait and see mode. Well, now we're seeing, and it's time to take action. That doesn't mean burning yourself out or trying to do all the things, but it does mean moving with purpose. Back in 2009, when I ran my brick-and-mortar boutique during what was the biggest recession of my lifetime, I still did $650,000 in sales that year. Why? Because I leaned in. I got scrappy. In our store, we focused on clienteling, calling up customers whenever we got new items in. I didn't just sit back and wait for people to walk through the door. I got out there and I got visible. You might be in a season where you have to roll up your sleeves a bit more. Maybe you've stepped back and delegated a lot, which is great. But this might be the moment to get closer to the data, closer to your marketing, and closer to your customer again. The goal is to be present, keep your eye on the prize, and keep moving forward. I also want to remind you that you are not alone in this. Every small business is being touched in some way. Early results from Proof to Product State of the Industry survey show that at least 44% of respondents are being directly affected by these changes. And my guess is that number is going to be even higher because some people might not realize that they're going to be impacted because maybe they're not ordering directly from the manufacturer and it just hasn't trickled down to them yet. But the point is, aside from the giant corporate players who can lobby their way to a carve-out or offset losses with layoffs, the rest of us are on a level playing field. That doesn't make it easier, but it does mean there's a whole community of small business owners who know exactly how you feel and who are navigating this right alongside you. All right, so now that we got the pep talk out of the way, let's run through the latest updates on Trump's tariff policy. On April 5th, global tariffs of 10% went into effect. This is on top of any existing tariffs that were already in place. On April 9th, the higher set of reciprocal tariffs are going to be applied. For example, the 34% tariff on China. For China and Hong Kong, the de minimis exemption will be removed on May 2nd. When it comes to Canada, the USMCA is being honored with USMCA compliant goods retaining a 0% tariff. Non-USMCA goods will receive a 25% tariff, and then there's a carve out for energy and potash, which is 10%. If you want to read more into the specifics of these, make sure you check the show notes for a link to the Google Doc that I initially put together last year after the election. I've since updated it with a deeper dive into this April 2025 tariff announcement. As a quick refresher, the de minimis exemption is the $800 threshold under which no duties are required. And that's how it's been in place for many, many years. So many small businesses and consumers, even if you were importing, if it was under that $800 threshold, you wouldn't have been subject to tariffs, and so you wouldn't have even noticed. With this new rule, shipments from China and Hong Kong sent via non-postal service shipping methods such as DHL, FedEx, UPS, these are subject to the full duty rate no matter their value. Shipments sent via the postal network, for example, China Post, and under $800 are subject to a tariff 30% of their value or $25 per item, whichever is greater. And then that will increase to $50 on June 1st. With the de minimis exemption being removed or adjusted and the blanket tariffs being imposed, there's pretty much no way to avoid tariffs on goods from China, but we'll talk about how to lessen their impact in a bit. For my Canadian and European friends who make most of their sales in the US, good news, the de minimis exemption is still in place for now. That means your average US customer won't get hit with tariffs when they shop your site. That said, I did chat with a European client recently who mentioned her sales have slowed way down. She was wondering if Americans are still open to buying from international brands, and while I obviously can't read people's minds, my gut tells me the slowdown isn't necessarily because she's based in Europe. It's more about the general dip in consumer confidence and spending overall. There was also that short blip when the US pulled the de minimis exemption for like a day or two before they realized they didn't have the infrastructure to support that. Customers were shocked when they had to pay duties, and it may have temporarily spooked them from buying internationally. I still think it's absolutely worth it for her and for you to keep marketing to US customers. Just make sure you're being super clear in your messaging that you're a small business, that orders under $800 won't be hit with duties, etc. At the same time, though, this is still a good opportunity to start building up your local market. And that goes for everyone, no matter where you're based. If you're outside the US, start looking at each other's markets. Sure, other countries don't consume at the same rate as Americans do, but picking up a few extra orders from neighboring regions can make a difference. If you sell internationally and use Shopify, earlier this year they made their duties calculator available for all Shopify plans. This lets the customer pay any import taxes at checkout, and then you can ship with a prepaid duty label so it doesn't get caught up in customs. So all of that is well and good, but if the tariffs do go into full effect and you are affected, what can you do about it? Well, let's talk about it. Number one, negotiate with your existing suppliers. Yes, manufacturers value large production runs and prefer them when considering pricing, but they value long-term business too. So even if you can't buy huge quantities at once, they might be willing to work with you to help cushion some of the cost. The other thing to remember is even if these higher tariffs do end up going into effect, there's a good chance that they're not going to be permanent, right? Like if nothing else, the next president might remove them or Trump could remove them later on. Your supplier might see the value in making a few concessions now to keep you for the long term. So what can you offer them to make it worth their while? Pay up front for a discount. Cash is queen, especially for your supplier. If you usually pay on net 30, 60, or 90 terms, offer to sweeten the deal with faster payment in exchange for a lower per unit price. That might look like 100% upfront or a 50-50 split, half on order, half on delivery. This kind of offer will improve their cash flow, reduces their financial risk, and may make them more open to giving you a discount without requiring you to increase your order size. If they know money's coming in faster, they're more likely to flex on pricing. You could also let them batch your production with other orders. So if your production time is flexible, ask your supplier if they can run your products alongside another client's order that uses similar materials, components, machinery, whatever. Piggybacking off of someone else's production, they save on setup time, machine changeovers, labor, and ultimately it means lower costs for them and potentially a better price for you. Just be sure that you guys are talking about your expected delivery window and that they can still meet your timing. Another option is to commit now and ship later. If you know you're going to need a certain quantity over the next few months, but you can't take on all the inventory at once, ask your supplier if they'll do a ship and hold agreement. You commit to a larger production run up front, say 2,000 units instead of your usual 500, but they hold the finished goods in their warehouse and only ship and invoice you in smaller batches as you need them. So you get access to bulk pricing or better terms based on a larger order, but you avoid sitting on too much inventory and you preserve cash flow by only paying when the product ships. You can also do this with things like custom gift boxes and things like that. That's actually how I used to get my gift boxes when I had my brick and mortar. At the end of the day, your supplier wants your repeat business just as much as you want better margins. So don't be afraid to just start the conversation. A little creativity and transparency can go a long way toward getting a better deal for both of you. If you can't get your pricing with your existing supplier where you need it to be, it might be time to explore alternative sourcing strategies. This doesn't mean you have to overhaul your entire supply chain, but there may be smarter, more efficient options out there you haven't considered yet. For example, comparing manufacturer versus distributor pricing. Buying direct seems like it would be the best deal, but often, if you're not ordering in massive volumes, a distributor could end up being more cost-effective. Distributors are buying in bulk across all of their clients, right? So they are buying huge quantities. They're already handling all of the import logistics, and they offer you lower MOQs and faster turnaround. So it's possible that you could get some better pricing from them because they are getting such a big volume discount. If there are no good distributors or you can't get bulk pricing on your own, then consider teaming up with others in your industry. Trade co-ops and buying groups will pool small business orders together to access better wholesale pricing and terms. If you can't find a group in your niche, start your own, even just 2 or 3 brands that you can team up with to split orders on common materials can make a huge difference. Maybe you know some other candle makers. You guys can go in on purchasing your vessels or your wax, your fragrance oils, right? Jewelry makers, maybe you guys can band together to get your precious metals and your gemstones. T-shirt designers can go in on blanks together. Like there's so many ways that you can bring your collective power together to negotiate better pricing. It's funny, even on social, we've seen this really big return to Costco recently, and there was a lot of small households that said they were partnering up with their neighbors so they could go to Costco, buy in bulk, and then they split it between them, right? Because they can't finish everything on their own. Same concept here. You're just going to do it for your inventory. You can also look at optimizing your supply chain to serve your largest market. While it's unlikely you'll be able to fully move your production to the States, you might be able to adjust your supply chain a smidge to limit some of the damage. For example, I was chatting with Katie of Proof to Product, and she was telling me one of her students, a Canadian greeting card company, actually found a printer in San Diego to handle her US orders because she does have a huge customer base here. So you may be able to do something similar. If you sell customized apparel or other made-to-order products, print on demand might be worth exploring. While the margins are usually lower, the ability to reduce inventory costs and minimize waste can maybe make up for it. Many print-on-demand providers also offer discounted rates if you decide to buy in bulk after a new design proves itself, for example. So in a way, you can kind of think of them like a distributor. They are sourcing blanks in very high volume across all of their clients, which means they're getting way better pricing than you could ever access on your own. Maybe you can negotiate with them a little bit to pass on some of those savings. And then lastly, even just engaging in a 3PL within your key market can streamline distribution, decrease shipping expenses, etc. Sure, it's not necessarily going to help you with the tariff itself, but maybe you can offset some of your other operating expenses. Sometimes the best place to cut costs is at the source, the product itself. Is there a way you can simplify, substitute, or repackage without sacrificing quality or the customer experience? For example, using off-the-shelf components instead of custom. Custom packaging, closures, specialty parts can drive up your unit cost. Swapping these for high-quality stock options can save you a ton without hurting your brand. So instead of custom printed boxes, use plain boxes with branded tissue or stickers. Instead of custom molded jars, use standard packaging that's easier to source. You can still create a beautiful product, a beautiful unboxing experience without as much overhead. And if there are certain materials in your product that are eating into your margins, or you just can't get the price where you need it, consider offering variations of your product that give you more flexibility in both pricing and sourcing. So you could launch a lower cost version using more affordable materials, or maybe you create a seasonal or limited edition SKU with things that are available now, and it can just be something really special that you run to get a cash boost. If you can substitute materials that don't compromise the quality or the vibe of your brand. There's actually a lot of brands that work with subscription boxes that do this. So there was a contemporary handbag brand I spoke to back when I had my box. I won't mention them because they do still exist, but they designed the product backward from the price point. So once they knew what the retail value of the item and the cost that the box was willing to pay, then they adjusted their materials and the construction to hit that target cost. It's a great reminder that sometimes flexibility in materials can be one of your biggest profit levers. We touched on this real quick, but to go a little bit deeper, if you still need to offset some of your costs, see if you can save at the logistics level. Taking a closer look at how your products move from supplier to shelf can reveal some opportunities to cut costs. So is there a way that you can consolidate smaller shipments, or can you partner with another brand to split a container? Can you work with a 3PL that specializes in consolidating international shipments for small businesses? Like, figure out if there's a way that you can reduce your transportation and handling fees and save wherever you can. When I was talking to Katie of Proof to Product about all of this, she also reminds us that not every product is going to make sense in this new cost environment, and that's okay. If the math doesn't math, it's okay to let it go. So what could this look like? Maybe it's retiring a product that no longer makes sense financially. Now, if it's literally your best seller and you're selling tons of units, you're probably not going to retire that. But if you've just kind of got this thing, it's been around, you're kind of emotionally attached to it, but it's just not working out, then maybe that's something you retire or you bring out only seasonally, make those adjustments. You might also come across products that, all right, you're taking a little bit of a hit on the margin, but if you sell direct to consumer, it's still enough to justify. But if you were to wholesale that item, it's literally not worth it. That's okay. Pull that item from your wholesale catalog. You do not need to wholesale your entire line. You need to wholesale the things that are profitable for you. If you've done all that you can possibly do on the product side and you still can't hit the margins you need, it might be time to look at your operating expenses instead. I usually recommend aiming for a 60% gross margin, but if you're stuck closer to 50, you could still break even or come out ahead if you tighten up your spending somewhere else. So that might look like reducing software or service subscriptions, renegotiating your shipping costs. So from you to the customer, if you're a high volume shipper, you might be able to get better rates if you just negotiate direct with a FedEx or a UPS versus going through a third party. Ultimately, boosting your overall profitability gives you more flexibility to weather high product costs, even if your per unit margin isn't perfect. So earlier I mentioned if you are outside the US, you might want to start looking at other markets, including your own, to sell in that have more favorable trade deals with your country. And that might be something you want to do even if you're physically based here in the US. I recently came across a video from a product-based business owner who manufactures entirely in China. She's got, I think she said, $160,000 worth of inventory sitting ready to go. She's already paid for it, but she's not taking delivery on it because with the current proposed tariffs, it just doesn't make financial sense to bring it into the States and try and sell it here. She's not 100% sure what her next step is yet, but she's exploring selling to other international markets instead, markets that don't have the same tariff restrictions on products coming from China. So she's looking into using an overseas distributor or a local 3PL to manage fulfillment on her behalf. Now, I know not every business has the ability to pivot like this, especially if your brand is already established here or if your product has specific regulatory requirements in other countries. But if you're feeling stuck or at a breaking point, this is just one more example of how you can stay scrappy, strategic in the face of uncertainty. The last thing I want to touch on today is a nugget of wisdom that our friend Kristen Fisher shared, and that's to lead with your head, not your heart. As a small business, you are already at a disadvantage in a situation like this. You don't have the same leverage that larger corporations have. And a lot of times, small businesses are hesitant to raise prices or make adjustments because it doesn't feel good. But you are still a business owner. And while you don't need to go out and price gouge your customers, just make sure you're not taking it on the chin, as they say. Who even says that? As I've mentioned in previous episodes, it's better to raise your prices a little bit at a time now versus having to make big jumps later. And once you do adjust your prices, just keep your eye on it. Sure, you might sell fewer units, but you could end up with a higher dollar profit at the end. Depending on the product you sell and your overall business volume, maybe you can afford to have a little bit of a lower margin because you do sell so many units. At the end of the day, you just have to get intimate with your numbers and get a handle on every component of your supply chain and how the math ends up mathing. Didn't expect to use that reference more than once in an episode. Make sure you check the show notes for links to additional resources, including the Google Doc I mentioned and some other helpful episodes. If you want help navigating all of this, consider joining us in the lounge. It's a great place to get ongoing support and strategy in your marketing and business growth, and it's dirt cheap, friends. One last note before we go. Remember what I said earlier. Do not get distracted by the noise. Stick to your strategy and keep moving. As we've discussed in previous episodes, businesses can survive and thrive even in so-called bad economic times. So don't let that distract you from showing up and continuing to sell your product. And that, my friends, is a wrap on this week's episode. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today, and I'll see you on the flip side. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you want to learn more about growing your e-commerce business, get started with my free resource library at ecommercebadassery.com/free stuff and get an invite to the lounge, my e-commerce marketing membership. When you're ready for one-on-one support, apply to work with me at ecommercebadassery.com/apply. Before you go, would you do me a quick favor? Leave a rating and review and tap that follow button. This pushes me up the chart so I can support more scrappy e-commerce entrepreneurs just like you. I'm on a mission to reach as many as I can, and I could really use your help. Thanks so much in advance. Until next time, e-commerce friend, stay badass.